Shalom. Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting my family to join in lovely, lovely Shabbat services. Having been born in New Jersey, it's always nice to come back. Patterson, by the way. Oh, you too. There you go. So this is a weird topic, and there's no good way to begin it, and it became more complicated 442 days ago. And so to be able to recalibrate these words requires so much background knowledge and so much lived history that the best we can do is scratch the surface. But because so many of us are in this conversation, and if you didn't realize you were in the conversation, the very fact that there is a police officer outside of the synagogue, which might have been the case before but likely wasn't, and in synagogues across the country, that has become the reality. If we think that the question of Israel is a compartmentalized part of Jewish identity, those flashing lights tell you it's a totality question of Jewish identity, because our existential safety is wrapped up in the global Jewish polity, which means Am Yisrael Chai, our people is alive, and we are actually a people even if we think we're not one. Let me say that a little bit differently. We're really good at disagreeing. And if you take, I don't know the shul very well, but any shul board. I served as a pulpit rabbi in 2 shuls for 16 years, and we're people, and we're Jews. And leadership is hard, and we all have big feelings. And often that becomes parcel of creating and stewarding a community. Amplify that by country, and you get Israel. It is the most impactful shul board trying to govern the ungovernable people that we are. We're really good at those disagreements, at those fissures, or, as the earlier book that I published is called, fault lines. And so we might see ourselves as distinct, different, and removed from the inner dynamics of the state of Israel, because there's the Jewish people everywhere we are. We became a diasporic people 2,000 years ago, and that became a decentralized way of saying, here we are, everywhere we are. In fact, Reform Judaism, in its inception in America, championed that idea by calling synagogues temple. Other kinds of Jewish streams did not, which was an emphatic demonstration institutionally that there used to be a temple, but we don't aspire that there should be a temple again. This is temple. So we see ourselves as disagreeable, disagreeing. Our righteous indignation flares appropriately often, especially when it comes to the attempted governance of our people in our homeland. No place makes me more angry and more happy at the same time, more proud and sometimes mournful, as my home. But the outside world has no idea about those differences that we might feel. The outside world says, oh, you're a Jew. And they mean there too. When the world media responds to what happens in Israel, often it immediately translates to some Jewish authority in the United States making a comment. And yes, we are sisters and brothers. But is that the language that you in your own heart used or use? Do you feel it to your core? Because our question about the complicated, I originally called this exploring the complicated place of progressive American Jewish Zionism. And the book was published a bunch of years ago. Boy, did it get more complicated. So now let's look at each one of the terms in order. Okay, progressive. What? What does that mean? As you might have heard, I founded a group called Rabbis Against Gun Violence in the aftermath of the Sandy Hook massacre. And everywhere I went in interfaith clergy dialogue, I was welcome until I said something about Israel. And that was true then. All the more so now in progressive spaces Zionism has become a dirty word. If it wasn't already, it certainly became so in the eyes of former allies with whom I marched in the Black Lives Matter movement. The pastor across the street and I in Berkeley, California, where I served as a rabbi, we brought our communities together and we did a die-in on University Avenue. We all lay down. It's not that I understood the interiority of the argument, but I stood in solidarity and lay down in the street in solidarity. But he was one of the architects of the charter of the Black Lives Matter movement that used the word genocide 10 years ago to describe the way Israel treated Palestinians. And I called him and I said, Michael, I won't say his last name so you don't look him up. I said, Michael, how could you? Don't you know me? He said, well, you're my closest Jewish friend, Menachem. No one's ever talked to me about this. And so the combination of ignorance and sometimes malice that pervades what is now progressive space makes my Zionism taboo, makes me exiled. I don't know if you've had that experience, but having stood up and sat down and marched and been arrested after President Trump's then executive order banning Muslim immigration, I and many other progressive rabbis raised our voices in solidarity with our sisters and brothers, by which I mean human beings who are Muslim, to get arrested. Because that's what we do. I don't know that we all agree on the politics of that, but when has a Jew ever been neutral when it comes to questions of justice? We're not allowed. There's no such thing as a neutral action, taught Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, which is why he marched in Selma. So the question of progressive is very complicated, and I don't want to wade into the stormy seas right now of American politics. It's hard not to, but it's also not useful right now, except to say that in the world of progressive politics, there is no room for me, because I wear my kidnapped family on my heart. And they're not welcome either. So, progressive is complicated. Let's talk about American for a second. You ever have that debate? I used to have it all the time when I was younger. Are you an American Jew or a Jewish American? You ever have that conversation? I was firmly in the I'm a Jewish American. Jewish is the adjective, and my grandfather served in World War II. My sister is a chaplain in the U.S. Navy. I'm fourth generation on both sides American. I'm American. The jazz singer speaks to me. That's my story. American is the stable part of me, and Jewish is part of me. That really changed for me on October 7th, because spaces in America suddenly were pushing me to the side and weren't always saying Israel about it. It's a cloak and dagger scheme when Zionism is what they say when they point at the Jew. And so, in my work for UJA Federation of New York, the amount of support we are called now to show doctors and publishers and artists and singers and dancers and lawyers and educators who are suddenly being marginalized on these shores, not for a stated position on Israel's politics, but for being Jewish. And if you think it's extreme, I can just point out example after example of employee who, when no one that supervises them is watching, confess at how marginalized they feel and how that has changed so rapidly. There's a film that I'm not sure will come out, but some good work was done on it, called Here We Go Again. I was interviewed for it, and I said, I remember when I was first ordained, it was 2002, and here I was, a kid, but with people my grandparents' age coming to me to talk to me, their rabbi. I don't know what they were thinking, coming and talking to me. I was humbled to be with them, and I remember hearing stories, I was in Boston at the time, about the old country, by which they meant Mattapan, Dorchester, Roxbury, Revere, Randolph, places where the Jews used to live before they moved to where they live for now. And I remember putting those stories of anti-Semitism where they were chased with rocks, called names, pennies thrown at them, graffiti, vandalism. I remember filing it saying, that's how it was. I never thought I'd hear stories like that from my children or people my children's age. And so progressive is complicated. American is suddenly very complicated, at least in my estimation. Jewish, it's always been complicated. Zionism. Zionism. Now, let's define it if we can. There are lots of definitions out there. Used to be that I would have said, Zionism is the right of the Jewish people to their own homeland. It's become a little bit more basic for me in these last 14 plus months. Zionism is the right of Jews to be on earth. It is Jewish dignity, period. What other people, forced out of their homeland, reconstituting themselves through tragedy after tragedy, claiming through political mobilization their indigenous home, could become the only successful anti-colonialist effort in history. Because after all, the Romans colonized, the Ottomans colonized, the British colonized. That's what it was called. Jews came home. Does that make simple, competing claims of rightful belonging? No. There are conflicting claims of belonging on the land, but the idea that the Jewish one is illegitimate, well, that's an attack on Jewish dignity. Forget Jewish sovereignty, Jewish dignity. Go home is said both in Europe at Jews, on American campuses at Jews, and about Jews in Israel. So here's one of the questions. Can we think about what progressive should mean? What American should mean? What Zionism should mean? And put that all together into a way that, I don't know if it'll convince anybody, but might help us make sense of this very strange moment that we're in, which even though the book says after October 7th, I don't know about the word after yet. I got this necklace 2 weeks after October 7th, when I and 26 rabbis from New York went to Israel. And I was handed this. It was so early in this story that when I left Israel 4 days later, the customs agent at the airport had no idea what this was. That's when this was from. It's rusty now. But it's not after yet, because I still have to wear this. They're still not home. And so the question of progressive is complicated. I want to say a few things about it, and then I know we'll talk at Kiddush. I hope we'll talk at Kiddush. I hope you always talk at Kiddush. It's a really fun time to talk. I grew up just waiting for Kiddush, because davening always began at 8 o'clock when I was younger at shul. Kiddush, late Friday night, that's the best. Flat hammer soda and dry kichel. That's my childhood. Okay, I don't know what kind of soda you have. But on the question of what does progressive mean? I'm going to play defense as if I've been attacked only because I'm used to it. Yes, I heard the word reactionary. That's exactly right, actually. It's hard not to be apologetic and reactionary. It might be my traumatized brain, and I have to own that. That might be part of this. But I believed in a world where the peacemakers had a voice until my friend Vivian Silver, who lived on Kibbutz Be'eri, was murdered. The terrorists didn't ask, what did she do in her spare time? Which was drive residents of Gaza to hospitals. She founded the group Women Wage Peace. And we couldn't identify her body until many months after the attack. So the whole question of progressive and thoughtful, the things I thought were true, have become much more complicated. I'm not going to end on that morose note, but I can't speak authentically with Jewish hope if I don't name the challenges. So yes, it's reactionary. But the truth is, Judaism has always been a response. The very Torah itself, it's a parenthetical point, but it shows how Zionism is a continuity of ancient Judaism. You know the rule, an eye for an eye? It is in Exodus, but it wasn't there first. It was in a collection called the Law Code of Hammurabi. But an eye for an eye, on a literal level, was based on societal strata. So if you were of lower caste, and you poked somebody's eye out and they were of a higher class, you were put to death. But if they poked your eye out, they owed you some money. The Torah comes and does this. No, it doesn't make a difference who you are. If you cause someone harm, you are on the hook. Which means Torah is always, and Judaism is always, and Zionism should always be aspirational and upward trajectory. Yes, it is true that the founding of political Zionism by Theodor Herzl was about creating a safe haven for Jews who had no home, the way he said it was. The world has a problem, the Jews. The Jews have a problem, the world. So let's offer to solve the problem. You want us to go away? Give us the place to go away to? We'll be glad. And that's why he founded political Zionism. You might know that he didn't do so because he went to shul and knew all this stuff. He was a journalist from Vienna who was sent to cover the Dreyfus affair. He wasn't even a very loudly identifying Jew, but when he went to the trial of Dreyfus, not covering it as a Jew, covering it as a Viennese journalist, he heard the mob, not a crowd, but a mob, not say guilty. He heard the crowd say death to the Jews. And he became convinced that the only solution to this ongoing problem, which again I thought was history, but statistics in America and Europe show me it's not, is home. Interestingly, by the way, he had many critics. One of them was an earlier Zionist than Herzl, named Echad Ha'am, Asher Ginsburg, who went to the first World Zionist Congress that Herzl founded in Basel, Switzerland, and Herzl was desperate to get his approval, because here was a world-renowned author, cultural icon. Echad Ha'am went to the gathering and said, I felt like they were dancing at a funeral. Why? He said, because they don't know any Judaism. They know Jewish identity and Jewish safety. Where's the Jewishness? I'm going to come back to the original point in a second. He said, we're not ready yet to create a homeland. We're not mature enough yet. We don't have the right statespeople. We don't have the artists. We don't have governance. Our religion has become ossified, lost in the past. We need better. And when we have better, then we'll be ready to start a Jewish homeland. He wanted, kind of to be silly about it a little bit, a John Lennon commune of Jews, where we could imagine the world as it should be. Imagine all the people, all of our people. Wouldn't that be nice? I mean, I lived in Berkeley for 11 years. Wouldn't it be nice? And the great battle between Herzl and Echad Ha'am raged. What would have happened had Herzl lost? Echad Ha'am could have created the commune, but there wouldn't have been any defense of our people in our homeland. So it's powerful to have the survivalist reactionary mentality, and it is also important to know that it was a marginalized people seeking justice on earth that led to the rebirth of the homeland we call the State of Israel. I want to say that again because that is the central tenet of progressive thought. Marginalized people deserve dignity. Progressive politics is free speech, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, civil rights. Well, if you look at what's happening in Israel from its inception, though it is beleaguered given global politics and the rise of autocracy and all of that stuff, women's access to reproductive rights is far beyond American imagination in Israel. And even if you go to Israel and see guns all around you, do you know that there's an ammunition registry, mental health checks before anyone can get a firearm? No one can have a firearm if they haven't served in the army. No one can have a firearm in the army if they haven't subscribed to, been tested on, and keep on being certified in Tohar Neshek, purity of arms. Does that mean everyone follows the rules? Of course not. But do you know why there's far less gun violence in Israel? Because it's progressive politics enacted by a very dysfunctional legislature. But it's progressive politics. Do you know, under the Netanyahu government, he's been elected so many times and in so many different ways, but 3 times ago, billions of shekels were allocated, with American pressure to be sure, to raise up the Arab-Israeli infrastructure when it comes to education, when it comes to medical, and when it comes to literally the roads, the infrastructure. The Ministry of Education in today's Israel funds bilingual Arabic Jewish schools. I mean, does anyone in America who's yelling at each other online or on campus or in state houses, do they know that? Is there any careful thought that goes into the difference between Palestinians in Gaza and the Arab Israelis who refuse to join Hamas's call? That progressive politics have led to more possibilities for more people. And ultimately, not only are we reactionary, we have been proactive because these ideas are not new. They are not recent. I mean, the state of Israel is recent. But it's not recent within Israel that these pursuits have been real. So let me offer just a few thoughts which point in an upward direction. Because it is hard in these moments. It's hard to stay true to the ideas that might have been first in mind, foremost in our brains, available to our hearts. It might have been easier 444 days ago. But what I want to say here is that the language that Israel had in its inception points the way forward. Yes, it is true, Od lo avda tikvatenu is also our language. What does that mean? We still haven't lost our hope. Have you ever thought about what a strange song that is? We know the words of Hatikva, but have you ever thought about what a weird song it is? When we are standing saluting the possibilities of Jewish dignity and the reborn indigenous home of our people, we say we still haven't lost our hope, which means you might have thought we would have given up. It would have made sense. Whether your ancestry is Baghdad or Syria or Poland or pre-British Mandate Ottoman Palestine, we haven't given up on our hopes for peace even when. You see the hundreds of thousands of Israelis demonstrating regularly against the government which shows you free speech is maybe threatened but alive. You see the changes in policy that are forced for just causes in Israel against a very complicated current administration. Listen to the language that gave birth to the political reality of Israel. This is from Megillat Ha'atzmaut, the Scroll of Independence, which I believe should be seen as a new chapter of the Bible. We call the late books of the Torah Megillot, scrolls. It's no accident that the framers, the founders of the State of Israel, called it not a declaration of independence, but Megillat Ha'atzmaut, a scroll of independence. And by the way, independence is just a fancy way of saying I exist. Atzmaut, etzem, my bones are here. Israel will promote the development of the country for the benefit of all its inhabitants, will be based on the precepts of liberty, justice, and peace taught by the Hebrew prophets, will uphold the full social and political equality of all of its citizens without distinction of race, creed, or sex. This was 1948. What had we just gone through? And this is the language that we encoded? It's unfathomable. The proactive, justice-oriented language of a nearly decimated family on earth. We will guarantee full freedom of conscience, worship, education, and culture. We will safeguard the sanctity and inviolability of the shrines and holy places of all religions. Think about world history in the last 30 years. We finally become the majority in our own homeland, and we pledge to protect every minority. How much more progressive could the world expect us to be? Israel grants the Arab inhabitants of the State of Israel full and equal citizenship and due representation in all its bodies and institutions, provisional or permanent. You want to see patriotism and progressivism in one place? Look at the previous Israeli coalition, where for the first time in Israel's short history, Arab-Israeli parties served in the governing coalition. Free speech, democracy, beleaguered, threatened. Too normal for my liking, but gorgeous and uniquely us. Finally, in its inception, on the day that all of the founders, including Ben-Gurion, knew that the Arab neighbors would all attack, Megillat HaAtzmaut, our scroll of independence, says, Israel offers peace and unity to all the neighboring states and their peoples and invite them to cooperate with the independent Jewish nation for the common good of all. And yes, it is lofty statescraft that I'm reading, but they signed it. They enshrined it. This is the way we articulated our understanding of ourself. Like this. Here I am, world. All I ask is that you grant me a space on earth. Let my children live in peace. Let me die in peace. Any marginalized person deserves that. Why don't I? And so what I want us to do in this moment, first of all, is take a breath, because I'm laying it all out on the line. And that's not fair. It's Shabbos. You should breathe. But be proud. Be proud of who we still are. I'll share 2 vignettes with which I'll close. Now 3. I'll try to keep it to 3. Here are the 3. I'm saying 3 over and over, so I keep it to 3. Number 1, in the before times, there is a before and an after for me. I don't know for you. In the before times, by which I meant the Ukraine war, which also is still not after, I traveled with a bunch of rabbis to the border of Ukraine and Poland. We went there to see the humanitarian work being done, the Jewish organizations that were involved in funding, and how the JCC in Krakow, that some of you might know of because of Jonathan Ornstein and its amazing work, how they turned on a dime to take care of Ukrainian refugees, even though their original mission was to take care of Jews and build their Jewish identities. And we went literally to the border. You could see people. I saw people, Ukrainian refugees, no men, because they weren't allowed to leave. They had to stay to fight. But women and children with carry-on luggage smaller than what I brought for the trip. I saw them coming, and they were walking to the gate, and we were walking to the gate, and the flag right above the gate in this humanitarian corridor is the Israeli flag. And I'm just thunderstruck. I'm like, what is this doing here? I traveled to the border of Ukraine and Poland to see the Israeli flag, and I go up to the flag, and there's a tent there. It's a medical thing. It's all Israeli volunteers. And this guy comes up to me. First of all, he thinks we're cousins, which is sweet. You're like, what's your name? And we had this whole conversation. So he thinks we're cousins. Turns out he's wrong, but we're all cousins. And he says, "Sho'olim oti babayit," they ask me back home, "Atem bodkim mi Yehudi lifnei she'atem ozrim lahem?" Do you check who's Jewish before you help them? And he told me his response to his friends back in Tel Aviv. Lamadnu lifnei 80 shana al seleksia. Lo osim et zeh. 80 years ago, we learned about selections. We don't do that. That's how he told me about his place on earth, our purpose on earth. The word progressive doesn't matter to me. Righteous does. That's one vignette. Another vignette. On that first trip, I've been back to Israel 4 times since October 7th with different groups. It's the only place I can live right now without translation. No one asks you how you are in Israel right now. So you don't need to ask. Say, hey, good morning. That's everything right there. No one asks me about what this means anymore. The airport in Israel actually has a permanent exhibit right when you arrive of giant dog tags. So the second vignette is 2 weeks into the after. I was sitting with a group of rabbis and we were meeting with a phenomenal speaker, a survivor of the Shoah. Her name is Rena Quint. You might know her. She lives in Riverdale. Her family lives in Riverdale. She lives in Jerusalem. And we were asking her impressions of everything. And obviously there was a lot of triggering memories for her. She was more eloquent than I'll ever be, more alive than really anyone I've ever met. Animated in telling her story, and she shifted in her talking to the survivors, by which she meant the survivors of Kibbutz Kfar Aza, Kibbutz Be'eri, the communities in the south. And then she talked about a young man. We all know his name. She talked about a young man whose arm was blown off on October 7th. She was talking about Hirsch Goldberg, Poland, but she didn't know that the next people to walk into the room were going to be Rachel and Jonathan Goldberg, Poland, who early on in their global campaign to save their son and everyone. And I was, because it was UJA organizing this, I was sitting next to Rena, and then Rachel and Jonathan sat on the other side of me, and I was in a vortex of our history. So much so that what Abraham Joshua Heschel said the days after the Six-Day War in 67, it became very true for me, and I have never emerged from this new understanding of what it is to be a Jew today. History and I were one. Because to my left is Rena and everything she carries, testimony and heroism and life despite. And on the right were Rachel and Jonathan, in those days newly ravaged, fighting. They never let up, and they still haven't let up. They are magnificent exemplars of what it is to love other people, to be good parents. And that's history. Schwer zu sein a Yid, they say in Yiddish. It's hard to be a Jew. But I'm going to give you one last vignette, which makes it, if not okay, because I wouldn't know how to do that these days, it'll make it a little bit better. Almost 7 years ago, I was blessed to be asked by my sister, who lives in Tel Aviv, to give her baby girl her name in the official Simchat Bat, in the naming in Tel Aviv, the first child of our family to be born in Israel. I'm also always in that moment. She has a gorgeous name. Her name is Ya'ara. Means many things, including hummingbird. And that girl and her young sister now, anytime I go to Israel, I have to see them, of course. These last 4 trips, some of them have been for 50 hours on the ground. It's very hard to manage those moments of intersection, and I'm always in these very heavy places, sounding like this. And so when was I going to see them? This last trip was just a few weeks ago. There was only one spot, because they live in Tel Aviv, where I was going to be able to see them. Only 1 minute, one place, which was Kikar HaChatufim, Hostage Square. And really, this is where I'm going to see my nieces? But this is where I'm going to see my nieces. So I'm with a group, I take a step away. It's an interfaith clergy group from Westchester. Blessed to be with them. Take a step away from them because I see my nieces and my brother-in-law just across Hostage Square. And as I'm stepping away, these beautiful Israeli girls run to me. And I run to them. And I scoop them up in my arms. All the time aware that that's all anybody in Hostage Square wants. But I'm not going to not hold my family. And in the middle of Kikar HaChatufim, with a speaker over there and the piano being played over there, all sorts of intensity crackling in the air as it has every second of every day for the last 14 plus months. My beautiful niece, in the middle of Kikar HaChatufim, shows me she can do a gymnastic split. Uncle Manchi! That's the only nickname that's ever stuck for me. She's doing a split. She is alive. While doing the split, she says there are 101 hostages still there. 2 of them are babies. Their names are Kfir and Ariel. And she's still doing her split. And she's jumping up and running around and telling me about her school day in Kikar HaChatufim, very much alive. So yeah, schwer zu sein a Yid. It is hard to be a Jew. On the question of progressive American Jewish Zionism, can I define all of those words forever? I cannot. Does the progressive world think Zionism can be noble? No, it doesn't. Are they wrong? Yes, they are. In some Zionist circles, are we suspicious of progressive politics? Yes. Are we wrong? Sometimes. Progressive values? No, those are Jewish values. The pursuit of justice, the pursuit of freedom, the right of every person to a home, to health, to life, to love. Those are Jewish values. Progressive has only been a word for, 1,000 years. Jewish values? No, we've got the game on that. So what I would ask you to think about, not make decisions about, debate with me about, be open and vulnerable and brave. We can talk about anything. In American politics, where we think we can't talk to each other when we disagree, let's just decide that the media is wrong. We can talk to each other about hot-button issues, because only fundamentalists refuse to think. Let's not be fundamentalists about any of this. My claims are worthy of your critical thinking. That's progressive too. When we say, Od lo avda tikvatenu, we still haven't given up hope. Let me just ask you to think in your heart of hearts, not raising your hands, not saying anything in response. If I say it to you, Od lo avda tikvatenu, we still haven't given up hope, do you feel that? Can you look back into our history, painful and glorious moments, sometimes in the same second, like a beautiful little girl doing a gymnastic split on holy, ravaged space? If she can do it, you can too. If Rena Quint, who's been through the Shoah, can talk with reverence about new survivors, we must too. All right, I said 3, I'm going to make it 4. This last vignette is really going to be the last thing. I sort of promise. We were involved, UJA was involved in bringing the Nova exhibit to Wall Street. Just show of hands, did anyone go? Anyone able to see it? No? I hope that you will make it a point when you are in Israel next, please make it soon, to go to Kibbutz Re'im, to the parking lot, to go to the site that has been set up to memorialize those young, beautiful people who just wanted to dance. So we brought an exhibit that was immersive and very ravaging to Wall Street in the hopes that more people who couldn't make it to Israel would experience some of the sights and sounds and spirit of these literally gorgeous young people. So I won't describe it. You've seen images. If not, look it up. Please look at the images. And it was hard. We brought 80 of our staff there. So we know what we were talking about. Go through the exhibit, and I can't even see anymore when I'm at the end of it. And because of the tribe of Nova, this gorgeous group of rave dancer people, they're beautiful, strange, but they're wonderful. And because of the nature of their work and who they are, the last space is intentionally designed as a healing space. There are mandalas and like stone sculptures and neon lights, and it's all gentle and groovy. And I just need to sit down. And so they had a picnic bench. They had benches set up indoors, just knowing you'd need to sit down. I saw a guy with this weird hair, but I just needed to sit down, so I sit down. And he says, "How are you?" And I say, "I don't know." And I talked to him about how hard the exhibit was. I said, "How are you?" He said, "I don't know. I was the DJ at 629 on October 7th at the Nova Festival. My name is Yariv. You can find me on Instagram as Artifex, F-E-X. If you've seen the clip, the video, he's the one who at 629 when they shouted red alert, that was him. They told him on the mic to do it. And he told me that it's been hard to re-enter the music studio. I've listened to his music. It is so not my style, but he is so beautiful, I always listen. He's my hero. Because that year, last year, Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel's Independence Day, I know everybody involved in planning things for communities was like, what do we do? How do we do this? So I looked on Instagram at Artifacts to see what Yariv was doing. And he was in the desert under a tent spinning discs, dancing with the tribe of Nova on Yom HaAtzmaut. I've never understood Am Yisrael Chai until I saw him do that. So for our children and their children, and to honor our ancestors, I'm not asking us to think less, but I am asking us to think bravely. When we are accused of being less than human, you know that they're wrong, right? When we are told that we are villains and we want to hurt people, you know they're wrong, right? I'm not saying everyone is a great human being, but even the not-so-great ones are human beings. That's progress. So yeah, I wish us a good Shabbos. But more than that, I wish your next breath to be full of self-affirmation, knowing that Am Yisrael Chai is about you. You. So, let's promise together. Am Yisrael Chai. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you to Rabbi Menachem Creditor for giving us so much to think about tonight, defining progressive American Jewish Zionism, and really reminding us the importance of the words Od lo avda tikvatenu, giving us pride and hope in our progressivism and our support of the Jewish state. You mentioned the Kiddush. In the Reform movement, we call it Oneg. Okay. And we do have an Oneg Shabbat sponsored by our Israel Arts Committee in just a minute or two, but we have a couple things to do first. First, I'd like to thank our cantorial soloists, Amanda Eastman and Jennifer Maddock, and they were accompanied by Tom Mustachio. They gave a lot of their time and talent for this evening's service, so thank you and Yasher Koach. And I would like to call upon Rabbi Creditor one last time. In my introduction earlier this evening, I referenced his global anthem, Olam Chesed Yibaneh. Translated, the song means, "We will build a world of love." And it seemed appropriate that our evening conclude with Rabbi Creditor teaching it to us and leading us together. So I'm going to invite Rabbi Creditor one more time, only this time with his guitar on and in front of the bima so that he can make a more direct connection with each of us in the congregation to lead us in Olam Chesed Yibaneh.
So you might know it, but let's just practice as if we don't. Say the words after me. Olam,
Olam
Chesed,
Chesed
Yibaneh.
Yibaneh.
And if you knew it already, great. If you didn't, sing louder. But nobody's off the hook. This only works if we sing together, okay? And wherever you are too, we're singing with you, sing with us. I can hear you, I promise. Na 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 na. Ya na 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 na. Olam Chesed Yibaneh. Ya na 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 na. Olam Chesed Yibaneh. Ya na 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 na. Olam Chesed Yibaneh. Ya na na na. I'll sit. Olam Chesed Yibaneh. Ya na na na. A little louder. Here we go. Olam Chesed Yibaneh. Ya na na na. 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 I will build this world from love. I will build this world from love. Ya na na na. You must build this world. You must build this world from love. Ya na na na. And if we build this world from love, ya na na na, then God will build this world from love. Ya na na na. Last time, here's your chance. Olam, Olam Chesed Yibaneh. Ya na na na. Olam Chesed Yibaneh. Ya na na. Just the ooh. Ya na na. Ya na na. Shabbat shalom.
Thank you to Rabbi Menachem Creditor. Thank you for all of you, for coming to our service this evening. As we mentioned, the Oneg Shabbat is waiting. And so as we conclude our service, we turn to one another and we say, Shabbat Shalom.
This was much more exciting than I